Javvon, I want to come to you because you're his friend. You were on the island on the 4th. You were on a different boat. Do you recall seeing him at all that day?
Yes, ma'am. I did see him when I was out there on the island.
Can you tell me what you saw? Does anything seem strange to you about the difference that people are saying of how he was separated from the group?
No, ma'am. I don't think that Nolan would say, hey, bro, I'm staying with this girl on the island.
For weeks, one explanation has shaped the public's understanding of Nolan's final moments. According to the friends who were with him, he willingly stayed behind on Horn Island after meeting a girl that day, expecting to find another ride back later. That version of events has remained largely unchanged, repeated across multiple interviews by several people from the same group. But this week, a voice with a much deeper connection to Nolan challenged that narrative. Speaking with CNN, Javvon Williams, Nolan's closest friend, shared a perspective that immediately raises difficult questions. "I've never known Nolan to stay behind while his friends left," he explained. "If he rode somewhere with you, he was coming back with you." That isn't simply an emotional opinion. It's a direct statement about a behavior Javvon says he witnessed over years of friendship, and his account doesn't stand alone. Separately, Nolan's father has also said the family cannot understand why their son would suddenly separate from the people he arrived with, describing that decision as completely out of character. Tonight, we're breaking down exactly what Javvon Williams said, why his words matter, and how they challenge the version of events that has dominated this investigation for weeks. When the person who knew Nolan best says the story doesn't fit the man he knew, it's a claim that deserves careful attention. If you're new to this channel, that's the approach we take every time. We don't follow the loudest speculation or the most viral theory. We focus on what identifiable people have actually said, clearly separating verified statements from assumptions, and we're transparent about what those statements do and do not prove. Subscribe now because tonight's discussion centers on someone who truly knew Nolan, not someone trying to solve the case from the sidelines. Before we examine Javvon's interview in detail, there's another perspective worth hearing because it overlaps with many of the same unresolved questions. From lingering contradictions to the retained tissue and other critical pieces of evidence that remain unanswered, several issues continue to fuel debate. Nancy Grace recently addressed those concerns on her own program, outlining exactly why she believes key questions remain unresolved. Let's hear what she had to say before we continue.
A teen's mysterious death getting nationwide attention after attending a July 4th boat trip with friends and never returning home. Now, a Mississippi grand jury will determine if criminal charges will be brought after the family's private autopsy couldn't rule out foul play in Nolan Wells' death.
There were 300 to 400 people out on Horns Island. You mean to tell me nobody saw anything?
Any parent that would be in this situation, you would do anything to find out what happened to your child.
Joining us now, Nancy Grace, former special prosecutor and host of Crime Stories with Nancy Grace. You know, Nancy, Attorney Ben Crump there has a point. You mean no one saw anything? Where do you see this investigation, where things stand?
I've got a lot of problems with the investigation so far, but remember, we are seeing through a mirror darkly. We don't know all the evidence. There's been one state's autopsy, and that has not been released. The family sent the body of Nolan Wells for a second independent autopsy, and that autopsy says undetermined. This is what I do know, Griff. I know on the back of his head, the occipital bone back here, there is deep red subcutaneous tissue. It's not anywhere else. It is not pooling of the blood once he's died. The blood pools at the lowest point. It's not that because it's only there. I'm curious, does that suggest a blow to the head? There are many accidental possibilities. When you look at the video out there, there are tons of boats. They're close together. Did he drink and drown in between one of those boats and nobody noticed? I don't know that. However, that deep reddening on the occipital bone is very disturbing to me. Also, you think, oh, he drowned, but we don't have the lungs. When the second autopsy got the body, the lungs and the throat were missing. Now, I understand, Griff, why they took the lungs to determine if he had drowned, but why was the neck missing? What about the interior of the throat sparked the initial medical examiner's concern. Was there some bruising on the neck? I don't know. So right now, it could go in so many different directions. But let me tell you this. The call that the friends made when they were returning without Nolan, they say he wanted to stay and be with a friend girl he just met. She, Katie, says, no, he left with his friends. I got a problem right there. That's a conflict in the testimony. But when you listen to the call the other friends made, they called Seatow, S-E-A-T-O-W, and said, we're sinking. In this newly released sound, you can make out somebody saying, wake the F up. What does that mean? I'm not resting till I find out if that's real. Has it been doctored? And if it is real, who are they talking to?
So many questions that you raise, Nancy, and as someone who's investigated these things, you know which questions to ask. I want to take you back, though, because that marking on the back of his head is not insignificant, as you rightfully point out, because also the size of it, right? It's like a 12 by 8. I mean, it's not a small clue in this. Expand on that a bit, if you will.
Yes, that's perfect. Right there is showing exactly where the reddened tissue is and is subcutaneous under the skin. Now, as we all know, in an autopsy, the skin is pulled away from the body to look at the tissue underneath the skin. That's where the second medical examiner, doctor, found it. Many people are arguing it was a blow to the back of the head. Many people argue he fell, hit his head on the boat, and went over. Well, if that happened, didn't anybody see him? So it's going to boil down to witness testimony and what that neck truly reveals. Again, why did the first medical examiner keep that part of the body? It was not sent to the second autopsy. That raises my antenna. There's a lot of hate going on around this case. It's very hard to understand. Again, it could be accidental. It may not be. And we can't stop the investigation until we know. This young man was 18. You know how old my twins are? 18. And I would be lying on the front of the courthouse steps screaming for an answer till I got one.
The concerns she's raising aren't new to this investigation. They're the same unresolved issues we've been following from the beginning. Nancy Grace pointed to the deep red discoloration reported on the back of Nolan's skull, questioned why the state retained his neck and throat tissue instead of returning it with the rest of his remains, and highlighted the long-standing conflict between Katie's account and the version repeatedly told by the friend group. Just as importantly, she was careful not to overstate what those details mean. She acknowledged that, at this stage, no one can say with certainty what happened. In her words, there are still many accidental explanations that remain possible, and the investigation could ultimately lead in several different directions before the evidence provides clear answers. That's the same standard we've tried to maintain throughout our coverage. We're not here to announce conclusions before the facts exist. We're here to document the questions that remain unanswered, separating confirmed information from speculation every step of the way. Tonight, another piece is being added to that growing list. This time, it comes from someone who knew Nolan better than anyone we've previously featured. Someone who says the explanation accepted for weeks simply doesn't fit the person he knew. Before examining that new perspective, it's only fair to revisit the account that has shaped this case since the beginning. Trostin Shepard, one of the friends who was with Nolan on Horn Island, described the events during an interview with ABC's Good Morning America. According to Shepard, he left the island by boat during the late afternoon of July 4th, while Nolan remained behind with a girl he had met earlier that same day. Explaining the situation in his own words, Shepard said they had only met that day, but Nolan seemed to genuinely like her. He also stated that July 4th on Horn Island was the only time the two ever spent together. Shepard has said he spoke directly with investigators and maintains that everyone from the group has fully cooperated with law enforcement throughout the investigation. A similar account has also been given by Warren Hudson. He described the boat experiencing mechanical problems, including a failing bilge pump that allowed water to collect, forcing the group to leave the island. According to Hudson, they departed believing Nolan had made the decision to stay behind and planned to return later with someone else. That version of events hasn't appeared just once. It has been repeated consistently in separate interviews by multiple members of the group over several weeks, and that consistency deserves to be acknowledged. Repeated accounts that remain largely unchanged can be meaningful and shouldn't be dismissed simply because another perspective has surfaced. But consistency alone doesn't settle an investigation, especially when another credible voice introduces a significant contradiction. For much of this case, that explanation stood with little direct challenge. This week, however, something changed. To understand why this new contradiction carries weight, you first have to understand who's making it. CNN identifies Javvon Williams as Nolan's best friend, not someone relying on rumors or social media speculation, but someone who shared a genuine friendship with him for years, long before July 4th. Javvon was also on Horn Island that day. According to what he told the Sun-Herald, he had originally planned to ride on the same boat as Nolan, but there wasn't enough room before it departed. Instead, he boarded a different boat. He also recalled the final moment he saw his best friend, a memory that has remained with him ever since. And what happened next would leave even more difficult questions hanging over this case.
Miss Christine, how are you and your family holding up?
A lot of praying, a lot of just leaning on each other in this moment and just taking it day by day. That's really all we can do right now. It's been hard. You know, every day is different. And really every second is different, which is something people need to understand. Grief is not one emotion, right? It's multiple emotions and they're all happening at the same time. And so it's just like 1 minute I can be I can be okay like this and I can talk about it. And then the next minute I'm breaking down in tears because it's a constant reminder, because if I'm being honest, we really just have not had time to fully grieve with everything that's going on.
This is your baby, and everyone must understand that. And Javvon, I want to come to you because you're his friend. You were on the island on the 4th. You were on a different boat. Do you recall seeing him at all that day?
Yes, ma'am. I did see him when I was out there on the island.
Can you tell me what you saw? Does anything seem strange to you about the difference that people are saying of how he was separated from the group?
No, ma'am. I don't think that Nolan would say, hey, bro, I'm staying with this girl on the island. Y'all go ahead and go back without even bringing it, like not even asking to get his phone back. You know what I mean? I don't think that any of that.
What makes you so sure about that? Because, I mean, obviously you've been with him. You've spent a lot of time with him. Did you know him to be someone to leave his phone or even say, you guys go without me?
Never. I've never known Nolan to stay back while his friends leave. He's always been a guy where if he rode with you, he's going to come back with you. That's always how he's been every single time.
You know, this friend of his, Trayston, also told ABC that video people have been talking about that was said to show some sort of altercation, it did not involve Nolan. He says it was actually him yelling in the video and that you and a family member were holding him back because he'd been in a fight. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am. We were calming Trayston down. In that video where he said, give me my effing phone back, it sounds like him. So I'm pretty sure that he was right on that, but...
Javvon, I'm so sorry to think about what you must be going through and thinking about what's happened to Nolan. I mean, you mentioned a phone. Tashima, a huge question so many people have is why he would have left his cell phone behind. And you say you were the person who actually went and retrieved that phone for the family. How'd you get your hands on the phone? Where was it?
That is correct. Christine called me and told me, hey, where are the boys? Nolan hasn't been heard from since such and such time. Where are your boys? I said, well, Javvon is with his girlfriend, and I just spoke with Jalen, and they are headed to downtown, which I was literally getting ready to get in the shower to go downtown as well. She said, well, Nolan hasn't been. So I instantly called with Christine on the phone, Javvon. Javvon said no, he hadn't seen Nolan since early on the island. And he was like, what? Are y'all serious? We was like, yes. And so Christine intervened in the conversation, said, Nolan has not been heard from since he left the island. So Javvon was like, well, that's when I seen it. I haven't seen it since then. Again, everybody goes their separate ways. So I then hang up from Javvon because obviously there's nothing he can say to tell me anything. So then Jalen, I call him. Jalen did not answer the phone. Christine again is on the phone. Jalen did not answer the phone. LeBaron, I called, he didn't answer the phone. I called LeBaron, which is their other friend, LeBaron Broomfield. He answered. He said, Jalen is in the gas station. Hold on. So he said, hey, Jalen, Mom on the phone. So he was like, Jalen, like, what's up, Mom? What's going on? I was like, hey, have y'all heard from Nolan? They said, no, we have not heard from Nolan.
But where was the phone?
So I was like, well, okay. So that's when we started checking the phone. Well, for Christine, it said one place, but for them on Snapchat, it showed another place. So that's the place we went to. And it showed that everybody that was in the house, it was like a lot of people there. Like I'm not familiar with all the kids. I only know like one or two there. But it showed that the phone was at what a lot of people were at. So that's how we knew where to go to. We went there. They were all there. They were sitting there, lights off, watching TV.
Did they immediately give you the phone? Because knowing that phone was there.
It took about 15. They did. They gave me the phone, but it took about 15 minutes to get the phone. Because I even asked, I'm like, did y'all have to walk back to Horn Island to get the phone? Or like, where's the phone? Because it took so long when they said it was when Wyatt told me it was in his truck, it took him so long to get the phone back to me.
Christine,
so when they brought the phone back.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Tashima. I want to hear that.
When they brought the phone, after I said something about it, he was like, well, she's going to get it. I was like, who's going to get it? He's like, the girl's going to get the phone.
As soon as we got out there, he told me he loved me. Those were the words Javvon says Nolan spoke before everything changed. According to Javvon, that was the last time he ever saw his best friend alive. Pause on that for a moment before considering the contradiction itself. This isn't someone piecing together theories from social media clips or online speculation. This is a person who was actually on Horn Island that day, who watched his closest friend walk away for the final time without knowing it would be their last goodbye. Now, he's speaking publicly, under his own name, about why the story that's been accepted from the beginning simply doesn't make sense to him. What makes his interview important isn't a summary, it's his exact reasoning. Speaking with CNN's Laura Coates, Javvon Williams directly responded to the long-standing claim that Nolan voluntarily stayed behind on the island. His answer was straightforward and unmistakable. I don't think that Nolan would say, bro, I'm staying with this girl on the island. He didn't stop there. Javvon explained that his opinion wasn't based on a single memory, but on years of watching how Nolan behaved around the people closest to him. I've never known Nolan to stay behind while his friends left. If he rode somewhere with you, he was coming back with you. Listen carefully to what he's actually saying. This isn't an emotional guess or a broad impression of Nolan's personality. It's a clear statement about a consistent habit that Javvon says never changed throughout their friendship. In his experience, if Nolan arrived somewhere with friends, he always left with those same friends. That's a claim that can be examined and weighed. It isn't vague enough to avoid scrutiny. Just as important is what Javvon is not claiming. He has never said he witnessed the moment Nolan supposedly decided to remain on Horn Island. He wasn't standing there when that decision was allegedly made, and he isn't claiming to know every conversation that took place. Instead, he's offering something different, the perspective of someone who knew Nolan for years and believes the accepted explanation conflicts with the person he knew. That's an important distinction, and it's one we'll return to as this investigation unfolds. Before deciding how much weight to give Javvon's account, there's another detail that deserves attention. He's not the only person close to Nolan expressing the very same concern. If independent voices matter to you as much as they matter to us, subscribe now, because the next statement adds another layer to this growing contradiction. Elmore Wansley, Nolan's father, has publicly shared a remarkably similar view, one that closely mirrors Javvon's comments, despite there being no indication the two coordinated the statements. Elmore has repeatedly said the family cannot understand why their son would willingly separate from the group he traveled with. He explained that they intentionally raised Nolan to stay with the people he arrived with, treating it not as a casual suggestion, but as a principle they taught him throughout his life. And when the observations of a lifelong best friend and a father begin pointing in the same direction, the questions surrounding that final afternoon become even harder to ignore.
Behind voluntarily. Why would he stay behind?
That we cannot answer. I can't fathom why he would. Like,
I don't know why he would. We always taught him to, if you go with a group, you stay with a group. Even when he was in college, he would say, Dad, well, we're going to ride down to a party or something in another city. Now, so I always tell him, look, if you go with 5, you come back with 5. Do not separate from your group. So I always say safety is in numbers. And he always said, yes, sir. So he knew to stay with his group. So why would he split from his group? I don't know.
So that would have been unusual for him to split from the group. And you said he would always check in with you. Did he check in with you that day?
so that day, no, I don't. But of course, too, they were on the boat. And usually when he is out there, which it's not uncommon, he's, I think, since last year, he's been going there occasionally with his friends. And so it would always just be like, hey, Mom, I'm back type of thing. But this time there was no call or text from him. It was from his friend.
And then too, really didn't worry a lot about it because, it was his last weekend to have fun because that Monday he had to report to school. We was preparing to take him back for camp to prepare for the season. So, we're gonna see. He wanted to have his last hurrah before he locked down and get ready for the season. Because, like I said, the entire summer he's training. He got more serious. He started to understand what I was trying to tell him about football, not just being fun, but as you get farther in it, it becomes a business. If you want to excel, and you have to understand, both at the same time.
Consider what this means for a moment. Two people who knew Nolan through entirely different parts of his life, a lifelong best friend and his own father, have independently arrived at the same central concern. Neither appears to be repeating the other's words, and neither has presented a shared theory. Instead, each reached the same conclusion based on years of personal experience with the person he knew. That doesn't establish what happened on Horn Island, but it does create a pattern that's difficult to ignore. This isn't a rumor passed from one person to another. These are two individuals with first-hand knowledge of Nolan's character, both saying the accepted explanation doesn't fit the person they remember. At the same time, this is exactly where the investigation requires careful thinking rather than quick conclusions. A powerful statement can feel convincing without becoming proof. People sometimes make unexpected decisions that don't reflect their usual habits. A single afternoon, a new acquaintance, or circumstances no one else witnessed could lead someone to act differently than they normally would. Being out of character doesn't automatically make something impossible, but people who know us best can still be surprised by a choice we make. That's why it's important to separate what seems unlikely from what can actually be established through evidence. The same careful distinction applies to Javvon's interview. He wasn't there when the boat ultimately left without Nolan. He didn't witness the conversation that allegedly took place before departure, and he isn't claiming that he heard Nolan say whether he intended to stay or leave. Instead, Javvon is offering something more limited, but still significant. He's describing a pattern he says remained consistent throughout years of friendship, explaining why the widely accepted version of events feels inconsistent with the Nolan he knew. That's a character-based challenge to the narrative, not an eyewitness account of the moment itself. Pointing out that distinction doesn't weaken what he said. It's the same standard we've applied throughout this investigation. Whether it's Katie McCormack's description of her interaction with Nolan, the friend group's explanation of what they believed happened, or Javvon's perspective based on years of friendship, each type of statement carries its own value and its own limits. Evidence rooted in someone's character and long-term behavior can be meaningful, but it isn't the same as directly witnessing the event in question. Recognizing that difference is essential if we're going to evaluate every account fairly. And that's exactly where Javvon's interview begins to stand apart from so much of the speculation surrounding this case. What he says next isn't dramatic because it's loud, it's significant because of how unusually measured it is. That next part adds another layer to this investigation, and it's one you won't want to miss.
Javvon, have you seen the video that's been going around social media where people think that they're hearing an argument between people and they're wondering whether or not Nolan is one of the people in that argument? You just described that you had another friend, not Nolan, another friend who was in and got into a dispute. Is that video the other argument that you were talking about?
Yes.
So, but is that Nolan in the video?
I can't tell. It's too far away. But in that video, I feel like the voices are too clear. Like from the side, it's too clear for it to be that far away, for it to be Nolan arguing. And then also that altercation, it sounds just like my other friend that got into the altercation on the boat. And they were trying to, like, as he was in that altercation, I was calming him down. They were trying to get him out off the island. They were trying to get him back to land because he was just losing it. So
Describe that. That's kind of interesting. What was that about?
He was just very hostile. Like he was just like really like mad. Like they were just trying to, like the parents on that boat were trying to get him out.
I'm curious if the police have. I know they said they're still investigating. Did any investigators ever speak to you about what you saw that day?
No, sir.
Really?
Okay.
Cops have not talked to you yet.
No, sir.
That's odd.
I don't see why the cops would have to talk to me. I mean, obviously, like, you know, like I had said my plea, like, because whenever I had talked to the people at Sunherd, it was whenever, you know, the body was discovered and the autopsy people and all those people were there.
Well, I'll tell you why I'm surprised. Because you knew Nolan well, and you knew that he was friends with these guys who were the last ones to be around him before his body was found. And I would think they would at least want to know, hey, just the things we're asking.
Right.
You know, did you ever hear of any of this stuff? It's odd to me.
Just to gather information.
Yeah, that the cops wouldn't have contacted you. Yeah.
And that's fine. Like, I'm completely fine with that. Like I said, I have nothing to hide. Like, that's my boy, and I want him to find justice. Like that, like this whole case thing, like whatever, like this whole situation, and none of this adds up to me. So like, it's really hard, like for like people to just like keep on saying things when like none of it adds up, honestly.
So one of the things that I'm sure, Javvon, you've seen has been a big part of this story, people making the point that, at least in the photos that we initially saw, that Nolan was the only African-American kid who was out there, at least on that boat. Do you think, having been there on the island with this large group of people, that race plays a factor in whatever happened here?
Again, I don't want to answer that. I don't want to answer that question. I wouldn't say like, yeah, I wouldn't want to answer that question. I mean, obviously we go to Ocean Springs, we're going to have white friends. So like,
yeah, I mean, and I hear you. If that's,
that's fair.
You're saying that it's normal. It's not out of place to be.
Javvon Williams has also taken a public position on another issue that has sparked intense debate. He has said he does not believe this case is fundamentally about race, a view that runs against part of the broader public conversation surrounding Nolan's death. Given how emotionally charged that discussion has become, making that statement publicly wasn't a simple choice. What's notable is that Javvon isn't embracing the version of the case most likely to attract attention or reinforce a particular narrative. Instead, he shared the conclusion he personally believes. Yet in the very same interview, he also made it clear that one part of the case continues to trouble him. The circumstances surrounding how Nolan became separated from his phone and his keys still don't make sense to him. That combination is unusually difficult to dismiss. He's not promoting the most dramatic explanation, but he's also not accepting the simplest one without question. Instead, he's occupying a far more complicated position. Someone who was there that day, who cared deeply about Nolan, who rejects one widely discussed interpretation of a case, yet still believes important pieces of the story remain unresolved. That's precisely why his account stands apart from so much of the speculation surrounding this investigation. He isn't chasing headlines, building a following, or trying to convince people of a particular theory. He's speaking as someone who knew Nolan personally, witnessed that day firsthand, and still says the explanation he's heard doesn't fully fit with the friend he remembers. Another important piece of this story comes through Javvon's family, adding new context to one of the investigation's most persistent questions, Nolan's phone. Javvon's mother, Tashima Hans, has publicly described helping Christine search for Nolan's phone on the night he disappeared. According to Tashima, Christine's location tracking app indicated the phone was in one place, while Nolan's Snapchat location appeared to place it somewhere entirely different. Two separate technologies, two different locations. All while a mother was desperately searching for her missing son. Tashima says she eventually went to the location shown by the tracker. When she arrived, she found the house dark, and according to her account, it took roughly 15 minutes before the teenagers inside returned Nolan's phone. As she recalled, it took about 15 minutes to get the phone. She also described uncertainty over who actually had possession of it. At first, she says she was told the phone was inside a friend's truck. Later, she was informed that a girl would be the one bringing it outside instead. As always, it's important to separate the facts of that account from conclusions that haven't been established. A 15-minute delay by itself doesn't prove anyone intentionally concealed evidence. In the confusion of an emotional night, people may genuinely not know where an item is, or frightened teenagers may struggle to communicate clearly under pressure. What this account does provide is something much more specific, a named first-hand description from someone directly involved in recovering Nolan's phone. It's not anonymous speculation or a rumor repeated online. It's a documented personal account describing another small but significant uncertainty in a case already filled with unanswered questions. Before we close, that's exactly why every credible voice deserves to be heard carefully, without minimizing what was said, but also without stretching it beyond what the evidence supports. If that balanced approach matters to you, subscribe now, because we'll continue giving every new development the same careful attention. So, where does this investigation stand tonight? For weeks, the central explanation has remained consistent. Multiple members of the friend group have repeatedly said Nolan chose to stay behind on Horn Island and intended to find another ride later. This week, that account encountered its strongest challenge yet. Not from online commentators, but from two people who knew Nolan better than almost anyone else. His lifelong best friend and his father, speaking independently, both questioned whether that explanation matches the person they knew. Neither man witnessed the moment the boat departed. Neither account, standing alone, disproves what the friend group has reported. What they do introduce is something meaningful, a character-based contradiction built from years of knowing Nolan, standing opposite an explanation centered on a single afternoon's events. At this point, those two perspectives remain difficult to fully reconcile. And that's not a minor detail, it's an accurate reflection of where the investigation currently stands. When you add Tashima Hans's account of recovering Nolan's phone, the confusion over its location, and the delay before it was returned, you see an investigation with multiple unresolved threads that neither side can fully explain on its own. Those questions remain open. The state autopsy report is still sealed. Final toxicology results have not yet been released. The grand jury has yet to convene.
And now, the narrative that shaped this case from its earliest days is facing a documented challenge from people who knew Nolan best. We'll continue following every verified development with the same approach we've taken tonight, carefully, fairly, and with a clear distinction between what has been confirmed and what remains uncertain. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us. We'll be here when the next chapter of this investigation unfolds.